Welcome again to another entry of At the Fireplace with Bertron Hamill. And I am Bertron Hamill. I welcome you into my home, into my log cabin, at my fireplace. And today we will read some more stories. And I figured I would do something different to kind of increase, to make the channel more interesting for folks. And that way you don't just sit there. That way you're not sitting there constantly hearing me blabber on about what I've wrote. I would like to simply take the opportunity with this channel to read classics with you as you get to enjoy the appeal of someone just reading a story by the fireplace, if that has any appeal to you. So if that does, then simply pull up a chair and may your hearth be warm. Not exactly cold enough to use my fireplace at this time, but I do have a candle lit, so hopefully the appeal still stands for you. So, I figured today I'll read an entry of public domain, classic, George MacDonald, Phantastes. So, my fiance recently been introducing me to this one, and this is a public domain edition. It's not a modern edition. And I was going to read this one. We will get to talk about my book works a little bit later on, but I just wanted to take this time to get to read a classic with you. And if you would like me to continue reading this book and reading on and completing it over the next episodes, let me know in the comments below. Please press that like button if you approve this post and all, this video and all. Kind of helps with the algorithms. Gets my name out there. I just want to present something that you may enjoy. Just share my time with you. Not a professional, don't claim to be. I just simply share my time. Okay. So again, this is a public domain edition of George MacDonald's Phantastes, a fairy romance. And he begins in chapter 1 with a citation. A spirit, the undulating and silent well, and rippling rivulet and evening gloom, now deepening the dark shades, for speech assuming, held commune with him as if he and it were all that was. By Shelley's Alistair. I awoke one morning with the usual perplexity of mind which accompanies the return of consciousness. As I lay and looked through the eastern window of my room, a faint streak of peach color, dividing a cloud that just rose above the low swell of the horizon, announced the approach of the sun, as my thoughts, which a deep and apparently dreamless sleep had dissolved, began again to assume crystalline forms. The strange events of the foregoing night presented themselves anew to my wondering consciousness. The day before had been my 21st birthday. Among other ceremonies, investigating me with my legal rights, the keys of an old secretary, in which my father had kept his private papers, had been delivered up to me. As soon as I was left alone, I ordered lights in the chamber where the secretary stood. The first lights that had been there for many a year, for since my father's death, the room had been left undisturbed. But as if the darkness had been too long an inmate to be easily expelled, and had died with the blackness of the walls to which, bat-like, it had clung, these tapers served but ill to light up the gloomy hangings, and seemed to throw yet darker shadows into the hollows of the deep-wrought cornice. All the further portions of the room lay shrouded in a mystery, whose deepest foes were gathered around the dark oak cabinet, which I now approached with a strange mingling of reverence and curiosity. Perhaps like a geologist, I was about to turn up to the light some of the buried strata of the human world, with its fossil remains charred by passion and petrified by tears. Perhaps I was to learn how my father, whose personal history was unknown to me, had woven his web of story, how he had found the world, and how the world had left him. Perhaps I was to find only the records of lands and monies, how gotten and how secured, coming down from strange men and through troublous times, to me who knew little or nothing of them at all. To solve my speculations and to dispel the awe which was fast gathering around me, as if the dead were drawing near, I approached the secretary, and having found the key that fitted the upper portion, I opened it with some difficulty, drew near it a heavy, high-backed chair, and sat down before a multitude of little drawers and slides and pigeonholes. But the door of a little cupboard in the center especially attracted my interest, as if there lay the secret of this long-hidden world. Its key I found. One of the rusty hinges cracked and broke as I opened the door, and revealed a number of small pigeonholes. These, however, being but shallow compared with the depth of those around the little cupboard, the outer ones reaching to the back of the desk, I concluded that there must be some accessible space behind, and found, indeed, that they were formed in a separate framework, which admitted of the whole being pulled out in one piece. Behind, I found a sort of flexible portcullis of small bars of wood laid close together horizontally. After long search and trying many ways to move it, I discovered at last a scarcely projecting point of steel on one side. I pressed this repeatedly and hard with the point of an old tool that was lying near, till at length it yielded inwards, and the little slide, flying up suddenly, disclosed a chamber empty, except that in one corner lay a little heap of withered rose leaves, whose long-lived scent had long since departed, and in another a small pocket of papers tied with a bit of ribbon, whose color had gone with the rose scent. Almost fearing to touch them, they witnessed so mutually to the law of oblivion. I leaned back in my chair and regarded them for a moment, when suddenly there stood on the threshold of the little chamber, as though she had just emerged from its depth, a tiny woman form, as perfect in shape as if she had been a small Greek statuette, roused to life and motion. Her dress was of a kind that could never grow old-fashioned, because it was simply natural, a robe plaited in a band round the neck, and confined by a belt about the waist. Descended to her feet. It was only afterwards, however, that I took such an imperative might naturally be expected to excite. Seeing, however, as I suppose, some astonishment in my countenance, she came forward within a yard of me, and said, in a voice that strangely recalled a sensation of twilight, and reedy riverbanks, and a low wind, even in this deathly room. "Anados, you never saw such a little creature before, did you?" "No," said I. "No," said I. "And indeed, I hardly believe I do now." "Ah, that is always the way with you men. You believe nothing the first time, and it is foolish enough to let mere repetition convince you of what you consider in itself unbelievable. I am not going to argue with you, however, but to grant you a wish." Here I could not help interrupting her with a foolish speech. Of which, however, I had no cause to repent. "How can such a very little creature as you grant or refuse anything?" "Is that all the philosophy you have gained in 1 and 20 years?" said she. "Form is much, but size is nothing. It is a mere matter of relation. I suppose your 6-foot lordship does not feel altogether insignificant, though to others you do look small beside your old Uncle Ralph. He rises above you with like a great half-foot at least. But size is of so little consequence with old me, that I may as well accommodate myself to your foolish prejudices." So saying, she leaped from the desk upon the floor, where she stood, a tall, gracious lady with pale face and large blue eyes. Her dark hair flowed behind, wavy but uncurled, down to her waist, and against it Her form stood clear in its robe of white. "Now," said she, said she. "Now," said she, "you will believe me." Overcome with the presence of a beauty which I could not perceive, and drawn towards her by an attraction irresistible and incomprehensible, I suppose I stretched out my arms towards her, for she drew back a step or two, and said, "Foolish boy, if you could touch me, I should hurt you. Besides, I was 237 years old last Midsummer's Eve, and a man must not fall in love with his grandmother, you know." "But you are not my grandmother," said I. "How do you know that?" she retorted. "I dare say you know something of your great-grandfathers a good deal further back than that, but you know very little about your great-grandmothers on either side. Now to the point, your little sister was reading a fairy tale to you last night." She was. When she had finished, she said, as she closed the book, "Is there a fairy country, brother?" You replied with a sigh, "I suppose there is, if one could find a way into it." I did, but I meant not something quite different from what you seem to think. "Never mind but what I seem to think. You shall find the way into fairyland tomorrow." Now look in my eyes. Eagerly I did so. They filled me with an unknown longing. I remembered somehow that my mother died when I was a baby. I looked deeper and deeper till they spread around me like seas, and I sank in their waters. I forgot all the rest till I found myself at the window whose gloomy curtains were withdrawn, and where I stood gazing on a whole heaven of stars, small and sparkling in the moonlight. Below lay a sea, still as death and hoary in the moon, sweeping into bays and around capes and islands, away, away, I knew not whither. Alas, it was no sea, but a low bog burnished by the moon. "Sure there is such a sea somewhere," said I to myself. A low, sweet voice beside me replied, "In fairyland, Anados." I turned, but saw no one. I closed the secretary and went to my own room and to bed. All this I recalled as I lay with half-closed eyes. I was soon to find the truth of the lady's promise, that this day I should discover the road into fairyland. And if we should continue on to the next chapter 2 of this story in the future episodes, just let me know and we will do so. I will say for this very next episode, I will read Dora the Wanderer. Now, I will include that one here in just a minute. So, again, I'm Bertron Hamill, and I recently have a debut of epic Christian fantasy. If you want to learn what I mean by that, you can go visit the first video on this channel and you get to learn more about that. Let's see. Now to some excitement. I have made the local newspaper, and they have an article about me and my fiance in regards our writings. She is a writer too. So I am Bertron Hamill, and I am engaged to Mrs. Erin Roach. And while I will not read this full article, I do want to simply introduce it to you so that you may look at it. This is an article put out by the Commercial Dispatch out of Columbus, Starkville area, Mississippi, and is also issued through their Starkville Dispatch. And that is the copy that I have. Let's see. So the name of the article is Fantasy, Mystery, and Everyday Romance. And I'll just read the intro and read a couple places here and there. Okay. Engaged Mississippi authors Bertron Hamill and Erin Roach share a love of writing as they create self-published stories together. By Ashley King with the Commercial Dispatch. Some couples bond over favorite movies or shared playlists. For Erin and Bertron, love is written quite literally into the pages of their stories. And let's see, it goes on to say, On most evenings, miles apart but connected through a phone call or FaceTime, one reads while the other listens closely. Neat chapters are unveiled aloud, plot twists are debated, characters are questioned, and somewhere between the fantasy worlds, mystery plots, and handwritten notes, their relationship continues to grow. It's so hard to wait for the next section, Aaron said with a smile, describing the moments when Bertron calls to read the pages he has written for one of his fantasy novels. I love hearing his stories. Their shared creative passion has become not just a hobby, but a love language, one that continues to shape their relationship as they plan their future together. As you might tell, this is a February 14th Valentine's Day issue, and they did a story on us regarding our romance and relationship as we are joint authors and shared authors. As we write and share about our stories together and our books that we write apart and together. So, let's see. I read on down here. The next section titles A Meeting That Sparked a Story, but goes on to read about us. Erin grew up reading everything she could find open, often telling imaginative stories to her younger sister before eventually writing them down. Today, she is a self-published author known for her mystery novels, including her Ira Wakely series, and the more intense 7 Men Minus 1 series. Bertron's journey into storytelling began through family influences and classic fantasy literature. Inspired by works like The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, he began creating fantasy worlds as a teenager, sketching maps and crafting storylines that would eventually evolve into a full-length novel. The Reckoning of Olote, Book 1. So, it goes on, extends on to the next page, and the lady did a sweet, excellent job in writing a sweet article, and she wrote a long one at that. So if you're interested in reading more about this story and this article that they did for Aaron and I, please go check it out. It is called Fantasy, Mystery, and Everyday Romance by the Commercial Dispatch, based out of Columbus, Mississippi. So, yeah, Erin does, is a writer. She does mystery novels. She also does fun fantasies. The editor didn't manage to work that into the story, and that's all well and fine. But yes, Erin is also an author, and she writes a variety of things. And we are also working on a book together, which when you read the article, you'll learn about that. Kind of got the title wrong. That's fine. It was close enough. But the Sea Tales of Filet is the work that we'll be putting out, and hopefully releasing as soon as possibly this year. We have it written and everything. We just got to go through the editing process, and from there, it just takes time, and we'll see how quickly we can put it out. But we're taking our time with it, and it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be great. And it's just going to be that's going to be the first episode to come. We already got another one, sequel in the works, and that's the way that series is going to work, or where it's going to be like, it's going to be very episodic book release, where sometimes you may have some continuation here and there, but mostly it's probably going to be its own standalone entries throughout the story. So it's going to be this ongoing. What it is a fantasy world that takes fantasy universe rather of sea. So instead of the universal space between interconnecting worlds and planets between space, we have an interconnected worlds in the vast sea of Filet. And so you have all these supercontinents and so forth. And we introduce some mythology. We also borrow from old classic mythology as well. Fairies, dwarves, elves, etc. Men. even going to be including leprechauns and that type of thing from time to time. And we're really going to just have fun with it and branch out a little bit. So it's going to be a fun story to write. It's going to be Christian fantasy. That one's going to be much more lighthearted, much more akin to the Chronicles of Narnia. Anyway, just giving you all the what to look forward to there. In the meantime, let me talk about my work again, the Reckoning of Olote. Well, next time, like I said, I mentioned Door in the Wonder. Let me go back to Erin's work. She wrote a fantasy called Door in the Wanderer. And this is very much, I would call this a low fantasy. It takes place within our world. But it's a very fun read. It's much akin to Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's very similar in terms of how it reads and how it feels. It's very much not like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where its story is concerned, where the narrative is concerned, but the kind of story it is very similar. I'm not going to spoil it for you. I will probably read this on the next entry. Erin was very happy about me considering doing this channel, and including potentially reading her work on here as well. We will be featuring her work, and you'll get to see and explore Door in the Wanderer, chapter by chapter, but not on a continuous basis. We'll spread that one out simply for her sake. In fact, I think it may be just one chapter, if I remember correctly when we're talking with her. So, if she feels comfortable with me doing another chapter another time, eventually we'll do that. So, but we will be reading an entry of Door in the Wanderer by Mrs. Erin Roach. All right. So, Reckoning of Olote. I've already introduced it. I already read some excerpts from it. Let's see. Oh, I thought of an excerpt earlier that I wanted to read. I'm trying to remember which one that was. There actually are some good places here for me to pull out, if I can remember where I think of them. No, not this chapter. Yes. So I will read about a conversation between King Liphus and Dower here. So this takes place in chapter 9, the third battle. And kind of give a little context here. This is one of the third major battles that take place of the Jalwraith, the war between Qurar and the Elaith. And basically, in reading these battles, you can kind of think similar along the lines of Tolkien's The Silmarillion, where you have this epic scale of battles where it's basically akin to World War I in nature, where you have so many nations involved that are lined up in common causes. And so in this case, in the great battles and wars of the Jalwraith, that is very much the case, where you have many nations together lined up. And the scale of the conflicts are quite grand. This is the case where we read about the offensive being taken from the Elaith. It comes to a place where the Elaith are in the southern fields of Hodarian, and they line up their lines, battle lines against army across the field, facing each other. And we get to a place where the Dower here, the villain, I'm trying to make sure that's it. Recognize where my paragraph is. Yeah. So, Dower here, the Witchmaster, is in a lathe. He's in a lie, like the rest of them. Only he's a very significant character across the story, across the generations and ages. And that being, he has practically an undying state of living. He doesn't die. He doesn't age. Oh, he does age, but he doesn't die. And that is through the witchcraft and sorcery, through the influence with the fallen angels in this world, but specifically, especially Korra. But this Dower here simply apprenticed under fallen angels. I won't go too much into the lore beyond that, but just kind of give you an idea. We're dealing with a very unnatural Eli, which is to say, yes, the people of Olote are called the Elaith, and hence Elaith are called in singular terms Eli, or at least in individual terms they're called Eli. Okay, but Dower here. Okay. Anyway, I gave you what you needed to know. I'm sorry, it's always. I'm still learning how to discuss my work without giving too much, and I simply want to go figure it out for yourself. But well, at least I want you to go read it for yourself at least. But anywho, let's read this excerpt. On the following day, Liphus, the king of Nintar, and Gavat had made standing formation in the northern fields of Kernan, where Carrick joined them. Then, as hours passed, the Urgas of Kernan came in answer, and the Witchmaster attended. As the two lines stood in the face of each other, Dower here rode forth alone. A gesture of words to be exchanged which would beg of both king and accountants. But while Liphus would take to the meeting, he expressed his desire for Gavat to remain behind while he rides alone. There is no reason to trust his honor of parley, your majesty, the accountant countered. Yet the king replied, and that is precisely why I asked this of you. He paused at Gavat's questioning eyes before he went on to elaborate. One of us must remain in lead of this army in the event that Dower here does not honor the parley. Gavat eyed him. And what of Thalfavolis? My son has my great faith in his wisdom and resources, Liphus answered. But while I lead the army under his command, he and the army must answer to you. He is inexperienced and is not ready to lead the battle itself. Liphus went on to add, as my friend, I am asking this of you. But Gavat returned with a request. At least take an Onar of arms in your company. No, Liphus countered. Dower here is alone, and it will be dishonorable to meet him with company. Gavat objected. And he will act honorably in kind? He is already without honor, my dear Gavat, Liphus answered. But even so, his dishonor does not shake the fact that I am responsible for the conduct of my own honor only, and not his. Liphus then took his leave. Liphus stood tall in his saddle mount. His golden hair waved in the flying winds in the fashion of his fathers. His eyes of gold met with eyes of coal. Dower here, the Nintara king greeted to be cut off by the Urgoth. Lord Dower here, your majesty, for I am Elaith, as are you, and I rule the Urgoths in title as is fit even by your Nintara law. You were once in a lie, and as Lord Terranor you were entitled among us, but that Witchmaster you have long left behind, the king answered with jaws tightened. Then Dower here spoke with eyes that flashed. His composure was calm, and his voice bore witness of ages long past. Do not speak of time and history with me. For what you have heard lying tales of, I have witnessed and lived it. I was there at the dawn of the Elaith, when they would crumble before enslaving words, and I was there as a lie hubris took shape in claiming honor, while their minds would feign to be gods. I have lived in the days when thou hast not yet been. Like your fathers, you were born and you will die, but I live on in years to come. And do your Urgoth brethren share in your blessing of long life? Do they not pass and await judgment? Are they not enthralled to only serve a time of life to a means of an end? Does the word of your majesty truly bear authority that it escapes judgment? Nay, fellow sorcerer, it is not a blessing to live on forever in this flesh after the curse that your master has ensnared us with, in which you yourself had a great part in, and you have embraced it. You are not blessed with long life down here. You are cursed with it. For as your Urgoths relish it, see ill for a time to heap judgment upon themselves, you will have long ages worth of judgment to heap upon yourself. Lifeless replied, and Dourhier but stood before him as he almost scowled, yet he never lost composure. Lifeless then changed direction of their speech to the matters at hand. As king of Nentar over Hildarian, I speak in authority that we will reclaim Kernan of South Hildarian, and you are requested to leave. In your compliance to leave, you will be permitted to go as you see fit. The Urgoth king laughed in a scoff. Though you may call us Urgoths, we are a lie of Kernan, and this is our home. We say that you come before us as thieves, nay, scavengers, who will kill to pillage and take a spoil for your own. Lifeless added comment. Ironic words for your part in conspiring with the enemy. You have stolen away these lands from Hildarian, and yourself have maimed both Eli and Elaine, and the children you have murdered. He paused before he asked, have you anything further to say, or do you accept our terms? There was a still moment as the breath of winds died. The sun stood over the early autumn's field with summer's heat still prominent, and if one's eye had gone too long absent of a blink in these sweltering conditions, it was sure to dilate. The king of sorcery stood gruffly upon his dark mare. He was gray-headed. A few lines of age were etched in his face despite his strength of youth. In stern countenance, he stretched out his hand to the Nentara king, as if agreeing to a settlement. The alive Nentar reluctantly but honorably graced his hand to the sorcerer to find himself change in temperament as he felt unnaturally cold. The Urgoth clutched hands with the king of Nentar, and he grinned to what would gradually become a heart-sickening smile. My King Lifeless, Dourhier said, as if almost sounding in poetic mockery. The blood of conflicts, sorrow, and legends await. Lifeless's brows furrowed and twitched as he continued. Let us not withhold one's death in Grave's Barrow from the next life's gates. And the witch master jerked free his hand as he rode off. Lifeless returned to Gavot, taking a great illness while his driving attention never forsook the moment's urgence. And as he joined him, 2 arrows of note had flown by the Urgoths. One arrow of flame flew to the west of the army, and an old line, hidden beneath the field's grass, was lit. The fire roared up to great heights as it spanned down a great line both north and south, and Dourhier's purpose was clear as their route west of the main bridge of Gallon was cut off with their back to the river. The other arrow bore a note. Your Highness, I take this moment to serve poetic justice. Thou dost ask of me to take up and leave, but now I make request and ask surrender of thee. Thou hast said that I might leave and be free to go, and I say that thy Eli might endure, and I will let life flow. But hasten with thy breath, for thou hast fairly caught thy death. After reading, the king's health declined rapidly. He gave word to Thalfavlis to follow Gavot's lead and to learn well from him, and he beseeched the accountant to aid Favolis in guidance as king. Gavot gave word that he would, and Thalfavlis honored Lifeless's words and followed Gavot's word, though it was done begrudgingly. Thus, Lifeless ended in passing his duties to Favolis. And that's where I will conclude for this excerpt. There's much more to be read in the chapter and much more to be read of the battle. I'll place my book back there for now. I did want to simply share also, this book does have illustrations. I do have an illustration here that did not get featured, simply because I have multiple artists at work. This one is a picture that comes from chapter 5, and it's a picture of the Bay of Eldan. It's a beautiful picture. It's kind of a shame that didn't make it into the cut, but I had another picture by another artist that I simply felt that just needed to be entered and featured. So someday, maybe when I have enough illustrations collected, maybe I can feature this in its own illustration book. This is done by Attican. I'm not sure how the name would pronounce. This is his trade name. He has a presence on DeviantArt. At least his accounts are still there. I have not heard from him in a while, and I'll explain them, and I do explain the book as well. This is the work that was done by him, Attican, ATIK1, as in the numerical 1, N. So how you pronounce that? That's his trade name he gives. I pronounce it Attican just simply out of my own intuition. Attic1 might be an option of how to pronounce it. But then his rightful name goes by Nikita Burbiak. Is the way it reads to me. He's responsible for this illustration, as he is responsible for most of the illustrations in this entry and in my book to come. I do have another book already in the works for the Reckoning of Olote. The next book is going to parallel this one in terms of the time frame. So while this one tells the historical narrative of the story of the world of Olote, telling the history, the other book is going to tell the till phrase, that is short stories and poetry. So it's simply going to tell the legends that take place in that world. So I think that's something that y'all have to look forward to enjoy. And I think that one, I think you may even enjoy it even more than the Artman. Although I believe the Artman definitely has its own library of tales and stories that's put together. So that for those who more like legends more than the history, y'all probably like that book more, but it is coming. And I'll have more illustrations for you. Attican did do a lot of illustrations for it. But at this point, Attican's from Ukraine, and I worked with him a lot over the years, communicating over DeviantArt, and commissioned him for his work for this franchise for my series. And I mean, he illustrated just about every chapter in this story except I mean, even chapter 5 ended up using different artists, but he did still do this one still, so I will hopefully feature that in a book specifically for illustrations only someday. I'll try to do that sometime. Eventually. He was in progress in illustrating the final chapter. Erin ended up doing, she gave that illustration that is present in there is a illustration that she gave me as a gift, which is talked about actually in that newspaper article. Anyway, I digress. But he was in progress in working on that illustration for me when he got called up to the fronts in Ukraine. And unfortunately to say, I have not heard from him since. So at this point, I can only suspect the worst. I pray that's not the case. Perhaps he's just simply around and just simply so busy that I just haven't heard from him. Yeah, I had commissioned him and way that system worked was where I would pay half of it in advance and pay the second half when he had completed it and so forth. And that's where we were. He had just drawn up the sketch for it and hadn't got to send that to me yet because he had got called in. Anyway, prayers for him and that. Hope he's doing well if he's still with us. Hopefully he's still with us. Anywho, that's one illustration, for example. And maps. So in the storybook, you'll find plenty of maps in the end. I like maps. This storytelling definitely called for quite a few of them. So this one, just to give you a case example. Now, I drew this one. The ones I'm showing you here is the ones that I actually drew myself. The ones you see in the book are ones that where Erin Roach took these and improvised them. She has quite the talent. And I just felt that her work on it would actually improve it from what I had. And there were some sketches of mine that were on ruled paper, which I could not possibly consider entering. And so I just simply asked if she would do that. So while she was doing that, she went and improvised all the other maps for me. And that was a great bit of patience and work on her part, and I am so appreciative of it. So anyway, so this one is a map of the Orville Hemisphere. I'll try to get close enough so you can see all the lines properly. The light. I beg your pardon for the light. It's kind of hard to see a little bit. That is the Orville Hemisphere of the world of Olote. There's two hemispheres, there's Sarville and there's Orville. Which one is west and which one's east? You'll have to look in the book and find out. But anywho, most of the storytelling takes place in the Orville Hemisphere. As you can see, there's 3 continents. I'm not sure how they're reading in the camera there. Hopefully they're reading frontwards, not backwards. But there's Hodarian, there's Castarian, and there's Tovarian. All right. So anywho, and of course there's other maps that magnify those continents. That's it. Any question on that? No fear for that. So anywho, that concludes this episode of At the Fireplace with Bertron Hamill. And until next time, may your hearth stay ever warm, and may your chair feel ever comfortable as you sit, as you wait for listening to the next story at the fireplace. Anyway, well, I'll tune out.